two miraculous plane crash stories, Miracle of Andes and Miracle on the Hudson. If you don't believe in miracles, then you haven't heard the two dramatic stories of plane crashes where the pilot managed to save all the passengers, or the 72-day struggle of passengers in a plane crash in the cold, snowy weather. These stories have been used as inspiration in various movies and books. Today, we will discuss more stories of miraculous plane crashes. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Uruguayan Air Force flight was rented by the old Christian Club rugby team to fly on October 12, 1972. The airplane was steered by pilot Colonel Julio Cesar Ferraris and co-pilot Lieutenant Colonel Dante Laguara. There were 45 passengers, 19 members of the rugby team and their families and friends. One other passenger was not related to them, and 5 crew members. On that day, they were about to travel from Montevideo, Uruguay to Santiago, Chile for a match. Due to bad weather, especially in the mountainous areas, the flight was postponed to the next day at 2:18 p.m. The plane they were about to board was a Fairchild aircraft that could not fly higher than 22,500 feet, or 6,900 meters. So the pilots planned to go south through the pass of Planchon, through the Andes where the weather was better. The mistake started when the pilot misidentified the location of the plane. About an hour after takeoff, the pilot informed the airport that they were in Curico, Chile, south of Santiago. They were actually still over the Andes Mountains. Over the radio, the pilot requested permission to touch down. Instead of landing at the base of Arturo Marino Benize International Airport, they crashed into a mountain, breaking the plane's right wing and causing its left wing to free fall into a desolate valley near the Chilean border. The radio connection from this airplane was lost at 3:30 p.m. on October 13, 1972. Once the radio connection was lost, the rescue process began immediately. There were initially 33 survivors and 12 fatalities, including the Ferraris pilot. Those who survived saw many planes passing over the place where they crashed. The snowy conditions of the Andes Mountains made it difficult for rescuers to detect the wreckage of the Uruguayan Air Force plane. Misinformation about the plane's last location and many people being skeptical that the passengers could survive finally decided to stop the rescue process on the 8th day. When the rescue stopped, they had been stuck in the valley for 10 days. For 10 days, they had to face freezing weather with temperatures below zero, sharp winds, and snowstorms. The valley's location at a high altitude made the air dry, causing the survivors to have difficulty breathing and headaches. The pain from the accident wounds was not to be forgotten. For protection from the extreme weather without food, heater, or medical help, they took shelter in the wreckage of the plane, using seat covers as blankets and turning their luggage into walls. Some food was found inside the plane, such as jam, biscuits, chocolate, wine, and candy. They ate them little by little, but the food ran out within a week. After the proper food ran out, they tried to eat pieces of torn suitcase skins. There were no animals to hunt in such cold weather. Even lighting a fire was impossible. To cope with dehydration, they chewed on snow, which was cold and burned their throats. Since eating snow directly was too risky, they used the metal from the plane wreckage to make a snow melter into drinking water. Various attempts have been made to cope with hunger in the midst of cold weather that never leaves the stomach full for long. However, the attempts made were unable to prevent the deaths. A few weeks later, 6 people died, including the company pilot Laguara. The 6 passengers died from their serious injuries and could not bear the cold weather. The surviving passengers began to run out of ideas for finding food. Eventually, they settled on eating the dead passengers. The Catholic passengers were hesitant at first, as the practice of cannibalism is a great sin. However, they had no choice. On October 29th, snow fell from the mountainside and hit part of the wreckage of the plane. 8 people died buried inside. By December 12th, after the snow avalanche, only 16 survivors were left. The 3 surviving passengers, Nando Parado, Canessa, and Antonio Vizintin, began searching for help by descending from the valley to nearby villages. Initially, they tried to turn on the radio in the airplane fuselage using a battery found in the tail of the plane. Through the radio, their request would reach the airport. Unfortunately, their attempt failed. They had to find help themselves down the isolated valley. The trio prepared for their trek down for a week, both physically and in terms of supplies, because they have to face extreme snowy fields. The The first attempt to explore the area around the valley failed because the temperature was too cold, which could result in snow blindness. Plus, the crash site was very precipitous. Their trek down was actually made on December 12th, the 61st day since they were trapped in the valley. In a short time, they reached 5 kilometers or approximately 3 miles. Parrado was almost dehydrated and hyperventilating as they hiked to the top, finding many mountains above. Despite the threat of dehydration, Parrado continued his trek with Canessa. While Vizintin chose to return to the wreckage area, he was not as strong as the others. Vizintin handed over his food portion to his 2 friends, hoping that they would manage to get help. 10 days passed. On December 20th, walking 37 miles, they finally found soup cans and cattle tracks. They reached the edge of the river, finding someone on the other side, a shepherd from the village of Los Maitenes named Sergio Catalan Martinez. They could not communicate directly because the river was blocked. They communicated through a letter tied to a rock and thrown by Martinez towards Parrado and Canessa. Parrado and Canessa explained their situation. The plane crashed and the surviving passengers are still in the middle of the valley, freezing and starving. Martinez couldn't help them immediately. The river water was too cold and strong. All he could do was throw pieces of bread to keep them from starving until help arrived. The next day, Martinez traveled 10 hours on his donkey to the nearest police station. Not long after, a helicopter arrived at Los Maitenes, rescuing Parrado and Canessa. Parrado showed the location of the plane wreckage. 6 passengers could be evacuated, while the rest had to stay another night accompanied by rescue officers. Parrado, who had been in a coma for 3 days due to a fractured skull when the airplane crashed, was taken to San Fernando Hospital, Chile. The other surviving passengers were transferred to the Santiago Hotel for treatment. The passengers who did not survive were buried near the wreckage of the plane, living forever in the Andes. On January 15, 2009, U.S. Airways Flight 1549, driven by pilot Chesley Sully Sullenberger and First Officer Jeffrey Skiles, flew from LaGuardia Airport to Charlotte, North Carolina at 3:25 p.m. Sullenberg was carrying 155 passengers, 5 of whom were crew members. After 2 minutes of flying, the plane hit a bunch of Canada geese, which made the plane's engine shut down. The plane was floating in the air. It was impossible for the plane to reach the destination airport or the New Jersey airport. Finally, he decided to make a sudden landing on the Hudson River, New York. Before that, he contacted the airport at 3:29 p.m. saying, "This is the captain. Prepare for impact." Even in the 4th minute, the plane crashed tail first into the river. The tail damaged so badly that a lot of water entered the plane. Fortunately, the plane floated on the very cold water because the fuel tank was not full. All passengers survived without any injuries. 5 of them were seriously injured. One of them was flight attendant Dorian Welsh. The passengers had to swim in 41-degree Fahrenheit water and 19-degree Fahrenheit air to the floating wing of the plane. What the passengers were worried about at the time was an attack of hypothermia. Sully, as the pilot of the plane, went back and forth to ensure the condition of the passengers. As soon as the plane landed, an immediate evacuation was carried out. The first to arrive was Captain Manny Liba of New York Waterways, who saw the plane like a spaceship because it was not supposed to be on the surface of the water. 14 ferries from New York Waterway rescued 143 passengers and crew, assisted by the U.S. Coast Guard and FDNY, who rescued another 12 passengers. This rescue is the single most successful sea rescue in aviation history. Captain Sully instantly became a hero for his quick decision to land on the Hudson River and save all passengers. The emergency landing was later recognized as the most remarkable aviation rescue in history. In the CNN article, several passengers were interviewed after experiencing the miraculous 2009 incident. Clay Presley, a former businessman who was seated in 15 at the time of the incident, said he had become an extreme claustrophobic until the moment he was interviewed. Claustrophobia means someone who is afraid of closed, cramped, and confined places. However, he tried to overcome it by learning to fly his small private plane, 1,549 hours, the same name as U.S. Airways flight. Donald Jones was one of the first passengers to be evacuated. At the time of the accident, he was 68 years old. He had to swim in the cold water up to the wing of the plane and wait for help for 10 minutes. For Casey Jones, the experience he had at the age of 48 made him appreciate his life and family even more. He will not let the little things bother him with this gift of bonus time. At the time of the accident, he was on a business trip from November to New York. Since then, he has taken to organizing an annual turkey feeding for needy families. Another passenger in seat 12A, Pam Siegel, who was a senior manager executive at the time of the accident, made a huge career decision. She wanted to have more time for her husband and 2 children, who were teenagers at the time. Her feelings were painful when she had to stop taking care of her children on the day of the accident. Unlike Siegel, Collins had to deal with her emotional unstable after a month of the accident. She sometimes felt very sad and depressed, thinking about something she had no control over. Sometimes she felt energized and optimistic. After a while, she realized that some parts of her life were starting to get better, especially her religious life. She became more involved in church and community activities. For Ben Bostic, the miracle on the Hudson incident led him to Laura Zick, who had caught his eye before the accident. Bostic first met Zick while waiting for the plane to depart, but he didn't have the courage to greet her. At a summer party in 2010, the surviving passengers organized a celebration of life. Most of them were from Charlotte, North Carolina. Meeting at the party gave Bostic the courage to say hello and talk to Zick until 6 a.m. Romance bloomed between them. After the incident, Captain Sully briefly returned to flying for U.S. Airways before finally retiring in 2009. He wrote a book and became a speaker. At that time, he was experiencing financial difficulties because U.S. Airways began to go bankrupt, so they stopped his pension and reduced his salary by 40%. First Officer Skiles still has a career in aviation as a commercial pilot. 3 flight attendants, Welsh, who was so badly injured during the incident that he needed surgery because metal from the plane wreckage tore his leg, chose to retire. Donna Dent and Sheila Dale are also still working as flight attendants. After the crash, the airplane was investigated by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, in a New Jersey warehouse. After the investigation was completed in 2010, the Carolinas Aviation Museum requested permission to take a piece of the plane. At the time, the museum was building its collection and came up with the idea to exhibit the miracle on the Hudson airplane piece. U.S. Airways then donated the airplane wreckage to the museum. In 2011, the plane arrived with residue and investigation marks. Following an investigation into U.S. Airways Flight 1549 accident, the NTSB recommended improvements to operational procedures, improved flight crew training to deal with emergency situations, improved airplane design and bird detection systems, and upgraded passenger safety with a more proper evacuation process.